Luke Brown.
Hi.
First of all, I want to say big thanks for this space, for the universe, because when I recognized that we are in the one island now, I was so happy, because for me it's the big opportunity to speak with you.
Great. I'm so happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, and I'm so happy that we meet. So let's start from the question, what is the purpose for you? Because if we speak about purpose, we need to speak in, like in one language.
Well, I mean, this is like trying to pull the ocean through a pinhole. It's like, that's a big subject. Yeah, creativity, really living my life creatively, being in service to the creative impulse of the universe and allowing that to translate itself through me. That's my purpose, and I see it as an act of service to the unfolding of life on the planet, and to be inspired and to act upon that inspiration through creative acts. That's my service to humanity and the unfolding of human potential. I'm wholeheartedly dedicated to this. This is the main event for me. This is not a hobby on the side. This is like absolutely 100% my full devotion in life is dedicated to my creative output by any means necessary, with any medium I can get my hands on. It's a magical act to me.
And when the first time you catch it, how old was you when you first feeling like, wow, this is what I want to do in my life?
Well, that was presented to me when I was a teenager. I grew up in a very creative household. My father's a musician, my mother's an artist, a photographer. It wasn't really that much of a stretch of the imagination for me to be an artist, but it wasn't that clear for me before. Until I was 17, I had a powerful mystical experience that opened me up, opened up my heart, opened up my vision, opened up my mind, and yeah, I received a very clear, visually administered transmission of that sense of purpose, and it was very clear that I was to be an artist and that I needed to just devote everything to it, and that was such a gift from divinity itself to be able to receive that as a teenager, because so many people at that age are fumbling their way through life, not really knowing where it's going to go or what's in store for them. And for me, it was very direct and very clear. And so, yeah, from that point on, I just put everything into it. Shortly after that, I signed up for an art school, and it was joined with my high school. So it was a really fortunate situation, because it was very rare to have that, to have like access to college level programs while I was in high school. So I had my regular courses, science, math, geography, etc. And then from the afternoon until I left was filmmaking and sculpture and figure drawing and painting and illustration, ceramics, and all these different mediums. So yeah, from that initial mystic experience, I was seeing in my inner vision a very unique, creative aesthetic, but I saw it applied to everything. And I saw paintings, I saw my whole body tattooed, I saw architecture, I saw sculptures, I saw jewelry, ornament, adornments, everything I could think of was overlaid with this creative aesthetic that was unique to myself. So yeah, it inspired me to just get my hands into everything. And so it was really an incredibly fortunate situation that was available to me when I was that age, and that it was just streamlined right from those initial mystical experiences right into having access to that. So yeah.
So you have clear vision how it will be.
Yeah, well, when I was really young, I was always naturally creative. Whatever I'd get into was something that had some kind of creative twist on it. And I was not really a team player. I wasn't really part of like group activities or sports. I was very much in my own little world, and so whatever I'd get into, it was really focused. And I had very vivid dreams from when I was really young. My inner vision was always very refined, and I was always very visually oriented. So when I was in school, things that were abstract were difficult for me, but when things are visually described with adjectives, I could see it in my mind. Yeah, I think I'm just naturally oriented in a particular way to have very clear inner vision. Mm-hmm. So as I got older and I was having these kinds of profound spiritually awakening experiences, there was a kind of transmission of vision that I was able to see, and I was inspired to translate it.
Can you imagine if you feel this, like your mission, but go to another way, because we always have a chance to go not the right path,
and before that time, when I was a teenager, I was definitely not on the right path and not really hanging out with the best characters, and had I followed that path, could have got into some really unfortunate situations, and fortunately I was able to have that kind of spiritually awakening experience when I was young that made it very clear where it was going and where I should really put my energy instead.
So after this experience, you understand that no another way, just this way. And if you go other way, nothing good will happen.
Yeah, and there was something about what was happening to me at the time and the art that I was making that to me felt like a form of the highest magical expression. It was like I was making myself available as an instrument for a creative conduit to move itself through me and allow something to happen that was beyond my ego mind and my own inner narration. It was something that was above that. And so I was able to understand that there is a condition that is outside of the mind and outside of the ego wanting to direct. It was like a state of surrender. And it became clearer and clearer as the years progressed that it was really about living my life in a way that allowed for that condition to be present. And so it led me to certain spiritual traditions and magic traditions and Buddhist traditions and Hindu traditions, Gnostic, mystic traditions, all these avenues that I was just gravitated towards because it seemed like they had something figured out that I wanted to know more about, because there was something that was becoming clear for me inside. And in my inner vision, I was being presented with certain symbology, and so when I started to come across some of the artistic traditions from Tibetan Buddhism, for instance, I was like, wow, what is this? That is so much like what I see. Like, why are they painting this way? And what are these figures? And what are these things they're holding? And so I was gravitated towards these things because of what they were creating visually. And then that opened me up to a deeper understanding of what these things are for, and using them as tools for
all
spiritual development.
Big mandalas and tankas,
Yeah, so that to me was like the original visionary psychedelic art for me.
Yeah, your paintings looks like tankas, but more psychedelic. Like
yeah, well,
you put inside.
I love what happens in those traditions, but for me it also seems very flat. It's like two-dimensional, but for me my creative mind keeps developing it and wants to see it in 5 dimensions. And
it's amazing how you can reach this state in the painting. Maybe it's the clear vision, see the vision, and you just know how to put it on the canvas, right?
Well, this has been part of the magic that I've experienced over the years, is that by being in that kind of that quality of consciousness where I'm just making myself available for this higher conduit of creativity, it's almost like an autopilot. There's something happening that I'm witness to and I'm not directing. And I've learned more from that process rather than actively studying and looking in and like deconstructing techniques and trying to figure it out. It's been more like channeling than developing skill set through study. Yeah, I'm amazed at times at some of the ways that it happens. It's a quality of consciousness that I have to cultivate my life to support. I have to just surrender to it. Yeah.
How do you support this state? You know, like you practice something, maybe you fasting, maybe you meditate all day. I don't know.
I mean, these are all things that I've applied throughout my life, and I go through periods of time where I'm more dedicated in the discipline of it, and other times I'm not. I've had some really powerful, profound experiences that have they've changed me forever, and they've become a kind of a reference point inside that it's always there. You know, sometimes if I lose track or I lose sight of where things are going, or I'm not feeling clear, there's always an underlying foundation from these experiences that I've had that if I do clear my mind and I do find the stillness and the silence, and it's very readily available, and that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy living in a place like this, and the more I can be immersed in nature and nature be right outside the door, that's part of the condition for me. That's part of just being in vibrational coherence with the synchronous unfolding of nature. I become vibrationally in tune with that. So,
you become the part of it.
Yeah, I tend to have a hard time if I'm in really hectic environments or being in dense, busy, noisy cities. I mean, I can find my stillness, but it's just not my preference, because it requires an extra amount of attention to try and bring me into that place of clarity, whereas here it's just my natural way. I had been spending time in the Himalayas for several years in a row with a friend of mine who is, he's very well versed in Vajrayana Buddhist traditions and spends a lot of time in the Himalayas, so he was always such a great guide and host when I would travel to those parts of the world with. And I had some really profound experiences there that to me were so deeply familiar, and I've been attracted to these traditions and to the Thangka painting traditions for many years before that, but it wasn't until I went there and went to these remote valleys and went to these places in really high elevations in the Himalayas and saw the intact remaining Tibetan culture that exists there, that it awakened a kind of cellular memory in me. And I didn't think I'd be surprised, but I was really surprised at just how deeply familiar it was and how much it really activated my creative purpose and journey in a whole other level. And initially, those times when I went there, one of the journeys was following the route that Padmasambhava had taken from India through Nepal. There are caves that he meditated in for periods of time, and now there's beautiful monasteries that are built around these caves that are still unassuming. I mean, they're just caves you have to move sideways through the rocks to get to, and just barely fit one person. There might be a little altar in the corner. These were some of these really profound mystic experiences that I had that awakened something really deep within me, and I had a deep sense of communion with Padmasambhava on that journey in ways that changed me. I'd been intending for a long time to do a proper portrait, and with all the conditions of the world right now, it felt really appropriate to invite this presence into my life in this way, and also into the world in this way. So this is quite a medicinal journey that I've been on with this particular painting. I had an experience several years ago where I had a ruptured appendix when I was in Bali. And I went through several different hospitals, all giving me different diagnoses. And eventually they said they wanted to operate on me to find out what was wrong with me. And so I wasn't into that idea. And so yeah, I went through a week of just excruciating agony to the point where my appendix had ruptured. And then it was absolute emergency and had to get to the hospital and found out that my insurance that I was paying for wasn't legitimate and that I had to reapply, which wouldn't work for this emergency. And the hospital in Bali were just gonna leave me to die if I didn't come up with $8,500 on the spot. And so a word was put out on the internet, and within 2 hours, all the money came in from all around the world, from people that I had never met personally, but people that saw the dire need and came through. And the doctors had said, had it been 30 minutes later, I would have been dead. So it was very, very narrowly averted. And yeah, it really put a lot of elements in my life really into high gear and emphasized the need to be putting merit into my art and into my creative acts, to not just be making eye candy, but to have a deeper sense of medicinal transmission for the viewer. And that meant really just getting in touch with that in myself and bringing that however it wanted to manifest from that place of intention.
After when you understand that the world support you, like people who you don't know support you, what do you feel in this moment?
It was incredible. It really brought gratitude for the opportunity to have this human body and this life and all the opportunities I have, to just not squander it or take it for granted, and to really make the most of it in every way possible. It's really emphasized from that, to not waste any time. So yeah, it was like a second chance to make the most of this life. And that's the Mahakala on my back is symbolic of that. In the Vajrayana tradition, the bodhisattvas are like the attractive principle that we aspire and emulate towards, and then the dharmapalas are the active force that are like, get on with it, like don't mess around, don't waste a moment. You know, this precious human life is the highest honor to be bestowed upon consciousness. Do something worthwhile that is of service to the world. Yeah, I feel that that's what my art is, and that's been emphasized so much throughout my life with all these opportunities to present my work in all these different environments, and you know, as I said, these overtly psychedelic culture events like Burning Man and Boom Festival, and encountering all these people that are switched on to other dimensional possibilities. And so I've had so many reflections from people constantly that reaffirm a lot of what's going on for me in my own creative process in ways that aren't really so blatantly a part of the work. It's not like, this is the subject matter, this is what it means, it's obvious. You know, sometimes it's very esoteric and very occult. But when I have these experiences with people where what they're sharing with me is so synonymous with what my own internal experience is, and what has happened for me internally throughout the process is then reflected in another in the exact same way, that's how I know that there is something else at play. There's like another force that's moving its way through, that is using me as the medium for it to present itself.
Who's your teacher?
I've had a lot of teachers throughout my life.
First of all, parents.
Yeah, my parents. Yeah, they were really supportive of me growing up. It was I was so fortunate to have that. You know, as these awakenings were happening for me, and my parents were like, you know, of course, yeah, that sounds good. You know, they weren't trying to box me into a framework that wasn't my own. They were really very very open, and
So
yeah,
they
they weren't
support
like
you in
they weren't
any
like you can't be an
experience.
artist, you won't make any money, you got to be a lawyer instead. You know, I didn't have any of that.
Because they're artists also, yeah?
Yeah, and surrounded by a lot of artists and musicians. So, I had a lot of examples growing up of people that really lived it to the were supported for their art. You know, so it wasn't like, you know, I had to dream of it. It was like there were people that would live down the street from me, and you know. So
It's
that
so
was-
important to have a support from closest people.
Yeah.
Because many people, many artists don't have this support.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I feel so fortunate to have had that right from the start. I had a running start right out the gate.
maybe you have some advice, I don't know, like some medicine words
for me-
to people
for
who
me,
don't have
it's-
this support.
For me, it was really developing the feeling of trust. You know, that confidence had to be cultivated from within. But for me, there was so much just a high magic in what was happening with what I was creating, what was happening for me personally throughout that process that gets infused into what I'm creating. And then what happens after that has been created, and the series of events and the people that I meet and the connections that happen. And from early on, it was incredible what was happening. And it's only become more incredible. I mean, to the point of just absolutely blown away by how directly related my own imagination of myself is into what happens in my life.
Yeah. Like,
I mean, without a doubt, it is intrinsically related. And so that just deepened that sense of trust that, you know, and from that original experience when I was a teenager, the sense that I had at the time was, you know, as long as I dedicate everything to this, everything will work for me. Yeah, it really settled me into a place of comfort in my heart. And yeah, and it's just been something that has been deepening and developing throughout my life. And I've been so fortunate to be able to be recognized by people that I've admired for decades, like just the highest level of inspiration for me in art and music, and people that now consider me amongst their ranks and give me the same accolades that I would give them.
so the Alex Grey also your friend?
Yeah, he's been a great mentor and ally for me, and big support over the years.
To resist your creativity is to be out of alignment with the cosmos, because the cosmos is infinite creativity.
And just seeing the way that how to live your life wholeheartedly as an artist and be supported, and to be able to be at peace with all the energy that comes with that and all the attention, but without any extraneous ego put on top of it, you know, to still remain humble and grateful.
Did you have some obstacles on your life?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it hasn't all just been like a golden platter of ease and grace this whole time. I mean, there have been some deeply painful, existentially painful periods of my life.
Like a big hole in the...
Yeah, but in retrospect, those were the greatest catalyzing moments that brought the deeply unacknowledged parts up to be seen and purged and released. And so it gave me such a sense of appreciation and the value of hitting the bottom and going through the deepest, darkest parts of yourself, because I had to go through that. I had to see those parts in order to change the course of my life. I wouldn't have done so had I not been put into such an uncomfortable position at stages in my life. Or comfort can breed complacency, but when you're put into positions where things are really brought to the deepest challenge is where you're forced to address things and change things that you wouldn't change otherwise. I spent years as a professional tattooist, and it was something that really took over my life. It was something that I could travel with. It was something that I could always make money from. It was something that was always available. And so it became this all-encompassing medium that took over my painting and everything else. It was taking me further away from my own visions. I was having to cater my creativity to other people and other people's visions. It was something that I was feeling like was gonna have to change. I'm gonna have to either do less of it or drop it entirely or take a break. But I wasn't doing that because it was just something that was just running on its own, and it was like it would just keep running unless I changed it, and I wasn't. And eventually I got to the point where I had developed so much crippling pain in my forearm, my wrist, and it wasn't just physically painful, it was like deeply existentially painful because I didn't know anything else other than my creativity. And so to find myself in a place where even holding a pencil was hard. I mean, it put everything about my life and myself and my confidence, and everything was in question. You know, it's like, if I'm not here to do this, what am I here for? And it made me just fall into some deep depression and anxiety and just doubting everything and questioning everything. And it felt like I had done it to myself because I wasn't listening. And I had some amazing opportunities to become involved with plant medicine ceremonies, and it really was the greatest gift because it allowed me to have the supportive environment to go into that place of real cathartic, emotional depth, to really acknowledge the root cause of why this is taking place. It wasn't just because I was tattooing and that I wasn't listening and to myself, and you know, it was something much, much deeper, and it was so deep that it extended beyond my own personal lifetime and my upbringing. It was like something way deeper inside the human condition. It was like I was able to see visually in my own body the condition in human consciousness that had given up its own divine spiritual sovereignty and the right to be the most powerful expression of self, to find the deepest sense of worthiness. All of that was in there. It was like I had manifested the pain as a byproduct, as a symptom of this quality of consciousness that, you know, like I wasn't believing in myself. And so I created the conditions to observe what it's like to not, you know, to validate the lack of belief in yourself. And so through these opportunities with this plant medicine, as I was able to see how deep that is, and to love it and to forgive it and to thank it for the opportunity of showing me that so clearly, and that I had that work had to be done from the deepest part of the self. It wasn't going to be given to me from outside. It wasn't going to be in the form of circumstances outside of me that were going to change. It had to change from seeing it deep inside and bringing it to the surface and surrendering it and letting it go, and to choose to be free and to choose to invite in the highest sense of self-empowerment and spiritual sovereignty, to claim it. And there were events that happened soon after that for me that were miraculous, to say the least, in terms of characters that came into my life, spiritual teachers, and opportunities to put my attention into my art again in a new way. And that's when I met Alex Grey. It was soon after that. And then from that meeting, there was a whole series of events that just cascaded out through being invited to events in Europe and being invited to present art alongside my heroes, like the people like, you know, the greatest embodiment of creative expression that inspired me so deeply. I was now able to exhibit amongst them show my work on the same walls and be greeted by the same, series of fans. And yeah, I see the relationship between doing that inner work and finding that reconciliation and that resolution in the heart, and then life just changes to meet it as a vibratory phase change. The hologram just shuffles and shifts to accommodate the new change in vibration within the self. And it was, there's been so many experiences throughout my life that just like shined that in my face, that that I have to have that as a reference to just not doubt. And by not doubting, I'm given experiences that validate why I shouldn't doubt. And it's like if we fear, then we'll get experiences that validate why we should be fearful. If we're in a state of trust and surrender and unconditional love, then the world around us gives us experiences that validate why we should love. And so that's been something that has happened as a result of my artwork for me. And it's as a result of being in that condition and being making myself available for the river of eternal creativity that is just expressing itself throughout all of nature, throughout all of the universe. It's an ceaselessly endless unfurling of novelty and beauty and synchronicity and vibrational coherence and symbiosis with itself. And it's our mind and our ego narration that puts a blinder to it and thinks that we're small, thinks that we're not having an effect on anything, and that we're not worth anything, and that we're out of sync with that. But there's ways to create the conditions to remove that and to come into alignment with what's happening all around us. And for me, that's my creative act, is my spiritual practice, because there's so much that can affirm that continuously throughout my life. And it's not an easy thing to share, because there are events in my life that I think for most people's context would be unbelievable. Like, it's just not believable. It's not how things work. But for me, it is how it works. And I've had enough of it throughout my life that I can reference it. The foundation of my being is informed by those experiences forever.
Wow, you speak so beautiful. I hear your speech, and I can imagine everything what you say.
Yeah, there's so much value, priceless value, in cultivating a state of trust and surrender. And that's been the greatest teacher of my journey with my art. In retrospect, being able to observe the way that it has unfolded for me, that was the message from the start. I just want to convey and share that the miraculous can be commonplace. There's a way to live your life that, by cultivating that daily sense of surrender and trust to the unity of all things, that life will reflect it back.
How you get this vision? How you get this inspiration? For example, when you finish this work, what will you do after? Like, you will get some rest maybe, or just pause, or you will invite in your life some new work, new painting?
Yeah, I think, for me, it's intention is a big part of the process. And also, I try not to force things. I'm grateful that I live my life in a way that has a lot of allowance for what might happen. And this has been a part of my process, is living my life in a way that allows for a lot of malleability and change.
Don't pushing, where is my inspiration?
Yeah, if it's not there, it's not there. I don't have to fight with myself. I don't have to be like, oh, I need to be more, why isn't it like this? It's like, that's not productive. That's not.
It's not work.
yeah, I try not to create too much resistance. And there are times where I'm not creative or I'm not being productive, and I'm okay with that.
You just live your life.
Yeah. And then because there are times where it really comes in strong, and I live my life in a way that allows for that too. That if I don't have to put that aside and be like, oh, it's not the right time for that. It's just like, okay, that's what's coming up. Okay, I got to just do that.
You just surrender, yeah?
Yeah, and for me, it's been really helpful for me to cultivate certain practices, to do yoga, to meditate, to do breath work, because there have been times where it does feel like a lot of energy is coming through. And without these kinds of tools, it can just be too much. I consider that creative conduit to be like a faucet. It's either on and it just it's flowing out. It's hard for me to regulate the power. I can't just be like, oh, I'll only just be this much creativity, just a little bit. It's because sometimes it's full power, and I have to just and when it's on, it's like, okay, everything outside in the world disappears, and I might be painting every day, 10 hours a day for weeks, and I have to just live my life in a way that allows for that. So that's been a big part of this process, is not having to shape it into something that it doesn't fit into. If I had to be accountable to getting into traffic and having a job somewhere that was not creative for me, and then this creative practice over here is like not prioritized, that wouldn't work for me. I can't do that. Yeah. It's like it's all or nothing.
Yeah.
And by committing myself to that has been the most phenomenal miracle of what life can be. Part of this process for me is it's almost like half the time I'm painting, the other half of the time I'm just dropping all of my preconceived perceptions and just staring at it and just letting it speak to me however it wants. So yeah, sometimes I would put the paintings up next to the bed, and just as I'm drifting off to sleep and just transitioning into that other sleep dimension, sometimes I get insights, and then I get back up and I'll paint because,
really?
Just certain things just have to happen in the moment. But yeah, this particular night I brought all the paintings into my room, and I had them all laid out because I was planning an exhibition, and I had a room that had bars on the windows, and my friend who had the room next door had a balcony. And I pulled all the paintings into my room, and I was staring at them, and then I turned out the lights, was going to sleep, and then I got a message from Ozora Festival in Hungary, and they said that they really needed this file, and it was the first time in the history of living in that house that the internet stopped working. And so I tried to send the file, it didn't work. It meant that I had to get up and go into town to find the only place that had available internet, where there was like nothing open. And so I got up, went into town, and then my friend that I shared the house with was there in town. And then within 30 minutes, I got a call from one of the neighbors saying that the house was on fire, and like really on fire. And I was there with my friend, and we rushed back to the house, and there was fire trucks, and the house is in flames, and there's water pouring out the front of the house because the firemen are up there hosing it all down. We managed to get inside and get upstairs. The whole upstairs is just burned away, and I happened to close my door, and I opened my bedroom door, and my room was the only part that was intact in the house. And so had I not got that call, I would have been tucked in bed, trapped in my room with bars on my windows, with a blazing inferno outside my bedroom door. And so yeah, it was some angelic intervention made sure to get me out of the house, because it would have been an eruption from an electrical fire that burned up all this flammable solvents, and which meant it would have just boom, it would have gone up really big, really fast, and yeah, I would have been stuck inside my room as this was burning outside. So yeah, that felt like a really clear sense of intuition and guidance. Because I could have ignored the message and been like, oh, I'll just deal with that tomorrow. But instead, it was like, I should really go do this. And so everything was saved, but everything outside my room was not. And so I felt a lot of empathy for my friend, because he lost a lot of work and a lot of paintings and a lot of personal belongings. And subsequently, after I had had this experience, sometimes I have these really vivid dreams. If I'm waking up by myself, I wake up and I'm half asleep, one eye open, having this crazy dream. I might have a friend online and I'll just type out my dream to them as I'm slowly emerging and, share this dream. And so after this fire had happened, that a friend that I had typed out a dream to her, maybe 2 weeks, 10 days before, she contacted me and said, do you remember typing out this dream to me? And she copied and pasted what I had written to her 10 days before. And it was a dream of me standing in the doorway of my bedroom, and I was looking outside of my room, watching a fire burn. And this fire was burning in a concentric circle, and as it moved outwards, the flames were getting bigger and more intense. And I was standing in the doorway of my room in my dream with my hands up, and I'm commanding the fire to stop. Like, just with every part of my being, I'm like commanding this fire to stop. And the flame moves towards me, and then I felt it cascade over the surface of my face, and then it went out. And so in my dream, I was protecting my room from this unstoppable fire and like stood in the way to block it from entering my room. And I completely forgot about this until she just copied word for word what I wrote. So it was like I had had a premonition of it beforehand, and like then didn't even acknowledge it until afterwards.
How do you enter the state? How do you enter the state before you start painting?
It starts with intention. It's not a matter of trying to force it, because it doesn't work that way for me.
How you work with your mind? I mean, maybe you have your own practice for quiet your mind, or like feel your body, connecting with your body, or...
Well, all of those things are very helpful for me, but I feel that this is something that I've understood over the course of my life and through some of these mystical experiences, is a communion with a dimension of higher intelligence that is informing the physical, and to find ways through certain tools to be able to come into contact with those dimensions. And there's a whole range of dimensions, and some of them are realms of shadow, and there's realms of light, and it's really a matter of really learning through radical discernment in your heart of what you're making contact with. Yeah, so I feel that I've been cultivating a communion with a realm of intelligence that is informing my artwork and my life. With this painting that I'm working on now, I had some experiences in the Himalayas multiple times with Padmasambhava as an energy of a really great teaching. I spent a lot of time meditating and just, I'm like, okay, if this is what is meant to be, then, show me what you look like. Show me how you want to be presented. I feel that we have the ability to have everything answered. All the answers to everything is available because we are that which we seek. There is no boundary to the inner and the outer, and the outer extends into infinity and the inner extends into infinity, and it's all occupying the same metaphysical space. Yeah, it's just a matter of just finding enough clear space inside and holding the intention. There's things that I ask, and the way they get answered is sometimes in the most amazing ways, sometimes in ways I wouldn't expect, you know, like cultivating the intention for this painting and then encountering people that are well versed in these traditions and in these understandings that just appear into my life, and they're just like, hey, boop, 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 and they just like bring this information to me, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's totally useful. You know, it's just, we live in a holographic imaginatrix that is, you know, reflecting our individual and our collective imagination of ourselves. And there are qualities of consciousness that can be much more powerful if you are vibrating on a higher frequency.
What do you feel when you're painting this? For example, this painting, it's about something. Another painting, it's about another.
Well, sometimes it's not always clear what that is from the start. Sometimes it's just a vision. It feels there's something important to it. I don't necessarily know just yet, but it's being shown to me, and then I get into it and start to manifest it. And then throughout that process, the story starts to develop, and I start to realize what it means, and there are connections that are made with other people, then reflections that I have with other people, and they start filling in the story, and then it's like, oh, yeah, that's what that's about, that's what that means. And then there are other times where it is a very clear vision. I really understand the meaning of it, and I want to convey it with as much accuracy as possible. And I really try to stick with the original vision and not stray too far, because there's something really important about that. But the more I could just begin the journey without being fixated on the outcome, you know, I have to just let go of all of that and just begin the journey. And by letting go of all of that is where the opportunity for the greatest magic to happen. And when I'm in that state, it's like an autopilot where I'm visually problem solving certain things by just being in the current. And for me, it's like there's a momentum that develops where, you know, and this is where it's a matter of just cultivating my life to support that momentum. Because once it's running, there are things that are happening that I'm not directing or I'm in control of, or I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this. It's just like I don't have an internal narrative describing it to myself as I'm doing it. It's like an empty mind, active meditation where things are just happening, and the witness is present and observing. And for me, that's the mystical element of this, is just coming into alignment with the omnidirectional creative expression that is making all of these plants grow, and all of, you know, everything in nature is a byproduct of that creative impulse of the universe and of God. And so for me, it's just cultivating my life in a way where I come into contact with that current, and I ride it. And sometimes I forget to eat, or I'm just
I know.
Weeks have gone by, I haven't even noticed, I've like forgotten to answer emails because I'm just like following this flow, and that's how it has to be for me.
How you sell your work?
I mean, that's also been a part of the miraculous unfolding. That's just been a part of finding myself in contact with the right people, at the right place, at the right time, and just being in that current of synchronicity. I mean, there's plenty of stories I could share of that, of how that's happened for me, and the people that have come into my life, and the places that I've been brought to, and being invited to events around the world, or being a featured artist at these psychedelic culture gatherings and festivals. And yeah, I mean, there's never been any guarantee for me. I'm not like, okay, I've put 160 hours into this painting, that means I get a paycheck for this much because this is my hourly rate. There's no guarantee. It's never been like that for me. And yet it's worked out because I trust. Yeah. I'm just surrendered to how it will be. And I'm not subscribing to the idea that I'm here to suffer, and that I'm a starving artist, and that, You know, I have to live with anguish and turmoil. That's not what I believe about myself. I'm here to thrive and be an empowered being through my creativity. And so therefore, my life is supported as a byproduct of that.
It's like connecting between your inner work and material space. Like when you work deeply inside.
Yeah, and just cultivating that trust within that everything's going to be okay, everything's going to work out.
But why many creators are suffering?
Because it's a matter of addressing that root cause inside that is standing in one's own way. And that was part of my journey, was being forced to address that state within that was getting in my own way, that wasn't believing in myself and was self-sabotaging my own journey because there was some part of my consciousness that was invested in that was, you know, it was almost like it was in the DNA, something that's been there for generations that had to be addressed and reconciled and forgiven and released. And by doing so, my life took a completely different turn because I was given the opportunity to sit with that and find peace. But it took really extreme conditions to get there. And so, and because I had such painful experiences in my life that have proven to be so pricelessly valuable in where it brought me now, that whatever is to come, I have more of a sense of trust and a skill set to be able to sit with whatever comes, you know. It's like that there is a perspective that can hold value even in painful experiences, rather than resisting it and be like, oh, damn you, universe, why are you doing this to me? You know, instead it's like, okay, what's the value of this now? Like, what is this opportunity for me to see something? Like, show me. As opposed to being a victim and being upset with the circumstances, you know, applying a deeper sense of self-referral to be able to observe and integrate and apply and accept, you know, even if it hurts.
How do you feel that?
Well, I mean, it is a confronting subject, but there are experiences that I've had that I feel like I've been given a glimpse into what the other side is. And, you know, I value and I appreciate and I'm so grateful for so much of what my life consists of. And so I want to be riding this as long as I can. And I accept if there's a moment where it's time to check out, then that's what's meant to be. But yeah, some of the experiences I've had throughout my life where I've been given an opportunity to experience death already. Yeah, almost like being given a death simulator experience, you know, and just see the eternal continuum on the other side, that it is the greatest illusion. There is no end. Consciousness doesn't just cease to be, it is eternally continuing, and that means manifesting into another human body, another form of sentient consciousness to experience it all over again. I hold that in my heart to be true.
Yeah, you perform this in your art.
But yeah, I think the more you can cultivate that acceptance of the inevitability of death and the release of what others may think of you is a golden ticket for a deeper sense of freedom. You know, when you're not overly constrained by other people's ideas of who you should be, is when the real magic begins.
We are infinity in a finite form. We are co-creative dreaming agents in a quantum probability matrix. We are the all that is, experiencing itself subjectively as every possibility that can exist through seemingly separate eyes in order to know itself. Therefore, we are unity by nature. Oneness is our true identity. And like a fractal, each component contains the entire pattern. To elevate one's own personal consciousness to a state of unity is one of the greatest contributions you can make to the whole of creation, because it has such a larger impact vibrationally to the holographic field than being in a state of separation consciousness and believing that you're just a small, worthless fragment that has no impact on anything, and therefore you're only expressing a very low bandwidth. But when you move into that higher threshold of unconditional, loving presence, the frequency that you emit is that of harmony, coherence, and stability. Like tuning forks creating a state of sympathetic resonance, you come into alignment. By turning my attention inwards to that source of intelligent infinity, to let that inform my life, I prioritize a relationship with centeredness, with groundedness, and by cultivating a daily state of immovable, unshakable peace, the rewards are beyond measure. That's where you find true freedom.
Have maybe some message to our audience, like, you know, the people who discovering, searching, people who feel that sometimes can be the dark night of the soul, and someone has already, someone have now, and someone feeling like something coming, like a black hole, and they feel fear.
I emphasize the value of inviting in that higher presence and letting that lead the way, because it's so much bigger than ourselves. And sometimes the depth of that personal darkness is the catalyst for real growth to happen.
As I see it, we're at the precipice now of the greatest opportunity in human history to catalyze towards a great awakening. And we have the ability to summon that into our lives. It is our birthright to embody our healthiest, most radiant, most inspired, most empowered self. So I encourage everyone to invite in that higher possibility. Sometimes it requires humility to let go, but in that letting go, there is receiving. And as we release those self-imposed illusions, our experience around us shifts to accommodate and reflect that new expression. And it opens the invitation for more presences into our life that also hold the same frequency. And the more of us that do that, the more strengthened the field becomes. It's the 100th monkey effect that tilts the scales. And we can move forward into a future of unimaginable beauty and grace. It's available to us. It already exists. It's not even a millionth of a millimeter away from us. We just need to summon it forward from within. This precious human life is such a gift. Don't waste it. Live a life of love, of purpose. So, cultivate fearlessness, find peace in the emptiness, trust that you're here for great purpose, and you wouldn't be here if you weren't meant to be here.